I love a good cheesesteak sandwich. The combination of the delicious beef, nice soft bread, the cheesy sauce, the onions, everything just works together so well, and they are absolutely delicious. For the longest time, I would never make them at home. I didn't know what kind of steak to use, how to make the cheese sauce, how to cook them, but now I'm gonna show you guys my way of doing it at home. It is super easy to make, and we're gonna do two different toppings. One, we're gonna go with provolone cheese, and the second, we're gonna do the cheese whiz sauce. Now, you can ask anybody from Philly, they have their own preference, how to do it, how to make it. I'm gonna show you how I do it at home, and then you can be the judge and figure out which one works best for you. To start, we've got our beautiful steaks that we're gonna use for our cheesesteak. For my video, I'm using these ribeyes. As you can see, they are all a little bit different, doesn't matter what type or brand of beef you use. I like to put these in the freezer for about an hour beforehand to firm them up. As you can see, they are nice and hard. This makes the cutting process a whole lot easier. The meat is not as flabby, and you can get nice and thin cuts, which is a secret to a delicious cheesesteak. One of my favorite things about making Philly cheesesteaks is that you can use less expensive cuts of steak. You don't need to get the super expensive prime or wagyu. You can use choice or anything that your grocery store has on sale. Since we're cutting up the steaks nice and thin, it really doesn't matter what quality it is because it's going to be nice and tender anyways. This is also a great way to use up any steaks you might have sitting in the freezer for too long. Don't know what to do with them? Take them out, partially thaw them out, chop them up, and you can make delicious cheesesteaks. To prep our steaks, I'm going to take my knife and just thinly cut them down. I'm going to leave all the fat around them because this is going to make for a nice and tasty cheesesteak, and just go as thin as you can. And as you can see, putting them in the freezer makes this a whole lot easier. Otherwise, these steaks would be super flabby and you wouldn't be able to get these nice thin cuts. This is kind of what you're going for, nice and thin, and as you can see, they just kind of pull apart on their own. If you come across any bigger and hard fat pieces like this, where it's more of a silver skin, which is not going to cook down on the griddle, you can just toss these out because these are not going to be good. My steaks are cut up and ready to go. I'm going to season them up right now and let them hang out with that seasoning for just a little bit to get maximum flavor out of it. We're going to hit our steaks with a little bit of olive oil. This is going to help the seasoning stick, plus will help it brown up nicely while they're on the griddle. For the seasoning, I'm going to use my all-purpose seasoning. We're going to hit the beef nice and heavy, making sure every piece is well coated. This is what you want your steak to look like, nicely coated on both sides. Now, I know somebody's going to leave a comment about the seasoning, that it's not a very traditional Philly cheesesteak seasoning, but it's so good on beef. Salty, peppery, garlicky, has a beautiful color to it. I'm telling you, give it a try and you guys are going to love it. You can also use salt, pepper, garlic, onion powder for that classic Philly cheesesteak flavor, or experiment with different seasonings and try different flavor profiles. It's all part of the fun. I'm going to leave my seasoned steak out at room temperature, let it hang out for about 10-15 minutes. It's going to start to sweat out a little bit and start to absorb those seasonings. It's going to be super tasty. I've got this nice big beautiful yellow onion and we're going to dice it up. I'm only using onions for my cheesesteaks, but you can also use bell peppers, hot peppers, really any other veggies that you'd like. We're gonna give our onion the same treatment as we did our steak. Hit it with a little bit of olive oil first and my all-purpose seasoning. I'm gonna mix these guys up and they are ready to hit the griddle. Can't have a cheesesteak without cheese, so let's talk about the two different ways we're gonna make our cheesesteaks. First up, we've got provolone cheese. These go on the cheesesteak while they're cooking on the griddle. Provolone will give your cheesesteak that mild, smoky, and delicious creamy flavor. And next, we've got Velveeta. We're gonna use this to make a delicious cheesy sauce to go on the cheesesteak at the very end. We're gonna add some grated sharp cheddar, some spices to give it that extra kick and flavor. To start on the cheese sauce, we're gonna go with 1 cup of whole milk. We'll add 1 pound of Velveeta cheese. I like to cube these up, makes it easier to melt. We're gonna grate down about a half a cup of sharp cheddar. Anytime I'm using cheese to make a cheese sauce, I like to use a whole block and shred it down myself. The pre-shredded stuff in the bag doesn't come out as creamy and smooth as when you do it yourself. We'll go with about a teaspoon of garlic powder and a teaspoon of onion powder. I'm gonna bring this whole thing inside, put it on the stove over low heat, bring it up to a low simmer, make sure the cheese gets nice and melty and well incorporated, and our cheese sauce is gonna be ready. And after a few minutes on low heat, this is what you end up with, a delicious, smooth, and creamy cheese sauce. Let's talk about the bread next. We're gonna be using these delicious Toronto French rolls. In my opinion, the bread is what makes the sandwich, and these French rolls are perfect for our cheesesteaks. They are nice and soft, super fresh. We're gonna toast them up so the inside's gonna be nice and crispy, and they're able to hold all our toppings, the steak, the onions, the cheese, when everything is put together. For our cheesesteaks, I'm going to be using my Weber 28-inch griddle. Let's get this guy fired up. While the griddle's preheating, I'm gonna hit it with a nice dose of olive oil. This is gonna help the steak caramelize, create that beautiful crust. Spread this out. I'm gonna be cooking my cheesesteaks over medium-high heat. You don't wanna get the griddle get too hot, but you want it to be hot enough where we can create that nice crust on the steak, get those onions nicely caramelized, and get our bread toasted up. We're gonna go in with our onions first, directly on the griddle. Spread these guys out a little bit, and we'll give them a few minutes to get nice and soft. Our onions are getting nice and soft, so we're gonna add our beef next. Right next to them, the griddle's nice and hot. You can hear that sizzle. We're gonna spread this out as well. You wanna make sure you get this nice coverage on the griddle to create this beautiful crust on our beef. It's been about 2 minutes. I'm gonna give my beef a flip. We can see the crust developing on the outside. This is all gonna cook super fast because they're cut nice and thin. We're cooking over high heat, so it's not gonna take long. Our steak is nicely browned up. Onions have softened up, so I'm gonna bring the onions, throw them on the steak, and we're gonna combine everything, let all these flavors come together to finish cooking. This is smelling super good. Towards the end of the cook, I like to separate my steak and onions into separate piles for each sandwich. So out of our 3 steaks, we've got about 3.5 ones, 3 little bigger ones, 1 smaller one. For the provolone cheese steak, we're gonna go with our cheese right on top of our steak. So I'm gonna go with 3 slices. Make sure it gets nice and cheesy, just like that. These other 3 are gonna use the cheese sauce. I'm gonna leave those as is. I'm gonna cover this up and let the cheese get nice and melty. We're also gonna put our bread down at this point. Make sure to get the insides nice and toasted. I'm not putting anything else on the bread right now. We still have a little bit of that olive oil on the griddle, so that's all that we need. We're gonna cover this up. Bread will get nice and toasty and the cheese will get melty. And now we can assemble. We're gonna go with the provolone cheese one first. As you can see, the cheese is super melty, gooey, ooey. We're gonna go with a little mayo on our bun first. Spread it out all over our French rolls. And this goes directly on our provolone cheesesteak. Press that in just a bit. Take your spatula. We're gonna go right underneath, scoop it all up, flip it over, and check this out. How good does that look? And for the cheese sauce one, I'm gonna go with a layer of our delicious, super creamy cheese sauce on my French bread first. And just like with the other one, this goes over our cheesesteak and onion mix. Press it in, spatula goes underneath. And our cheesesteak is almost ready. We're gonna top it all off with some more of our delicious cheese sauce. And we've got our 2 cheesesteaks ready. We've got this one with the provolone cheese underneath the meat, right on the bread, and the second one with our cheese sauce underneath and on top, and both of these are looking and smelling amazing. You've got the nice crispy bits to some of the beef, the caramelized onions, the bread is nice and soft, toasted on the inside. These are looking and smelling amazing. Let's try the one with our cheese sauce first. The steak is super tender. You get those caramelized onions, plenty of the cheese sauce. I mean, it's just kind of oozing out there. The bread is still nice and soft. This is, when I think of a cheesesteak, this is what comes to mind. Now let's try the one with the provolone cheese. And this one too, it is looking and smelling absolutely amazing. Similar, but still a little different. That provolone gives it that mild smoky flavor. You definitely taste more of the beef on the one with the provolone cheese compared to the one with the cheese sauce. The bread is still nice and soft. You taste the onions. You really can't go wrong either one. I mean, both of these are super tasty. Let me know which one you're picking, Team Cheese Whiz or Team Provolone.